Hey, welcome back everyone. Up here in Alaska, October is ending. Today's Halloween. We've got our freezer full moose and fish. We've got the firewood piled high. So now it's time to get back into a little hand loading, load development, equipment testing, and all that good stuff. A couple videos ago, I announced that whoever was our 200th subscriber, I would send them a pack of moose jerky. So we broke 200, and best I can figure, although my notifications are a little wonky, but as far as I can tell, the 200th subscriber was Brian W. Brian, if you're watching this and you want a pack of moose jerky, email me your mailing address at alaskatru@gmail.com. and I will get that jerky out and mail to you. Thanks a lot for subscribing to Brian and everybody else. Alright, so on the agenda today, one of my favorite YouTube channels, gun channels, is Gun Blue 490. The gentleman who runs it is really a walking encyclopedia of firearms and hand loading knowledge. As the saying goes, he's probably forgotten more about the subject than I've learned so far. So having said that, it's with all due respect that I must take umbrage with what the gentleman said regarding Magnum cartridges for mid-sized game. He's of the opinion that for things like deer, black bear, that a 30-30 Winchester is the perfect cartridge for that, and that really anything more than that is kind of overkill and is going to cause great meat damage, and that unless you're shooting animals like elk, moose, there's no reason whatsoever to, by the sound of it, even use a 30-06. And especially not the dreaded 300 Winchester mag, because who would ever need that much power in a hunting rifle, right? I've had my own experience on the subject. I have not been a fan of low velocity 30 caliber cartridges for mid-sized game. I've seen deer shot, perfect shot broadside with a 30-30 Winchester, run 100, 150, 200 yards after being hit before they finally go down. And I know deer are tough, some are a lot tougher than others, and some just don't want to go down, but when you see this enough times, you start thinking, okay, yes, it kills deer, it's fine. I mean, you can kill a deer with a pointy stick if you poke him right. I like animals to drop, or at least not go very far. And you don't really have to do a bunch of meat damage to accomplish that. 30-30 Winchester, and I would also lump into there the other low velocity 30 calibers. Back in the day, I often carried a SKS or later an AK-47 rifle just for walking around. If I thought I might be jumping a deer off its bed when I'm hiking around, I would carry something like that. With iron sights on it, because it's just kind of what it's designed for shooting very quickly, possibly getting off several shots reasonably accurately. But I didn't have good experiences with it. I killed a bunch of deer with 7.62 by 39, and I had pretty much the same effects, or maybe even worse, that I saw with the 30-30 Winchester. Perfect hit, you do everything you're supposed to do, and that deer just runs and runs and runs. Never saw it knock one down. Very seldom do you get a pass-through shot, and I've examined quite a few bullets out of those deer, and they seem to, granted I was using inexpensive ammo, not hand loads. I wasn't hand loading way back when I was using 7.62 by 39. So, it would penetrate in one side, you'd get good expansion, but it didn't do a lot of damage to the organs. Punch a hole through them, and usually either sit on the rib cage on the opposite side or on the hide on the opposite side, and very, very seldom would I ever get a pass through. Maybe if it slipped between ribs on both sides, you know. Especially when it was just penetration on one side, a lot of times, you know, that hole would kind of seal up with fat or hide or whatever. There wouldn't be much of a blood trail, and you're left tracking this deer for 100, 200 yards. So I've got to say that for the low velocity 30 caliber rounds, they did make me a good tracker. I really learned how to follow a blood trail and learn not to give up on it. But how many people shoot deer with these low velocity rounds and you know, aren't good trackers? Maybe their eyesight isn't good. Maybe they have mobility problems, elderly person or whatever, and they can't get out there and crawl around all night looking for specks of blood every 20 yards. So they give up. They think, you know, I must have been a bad hit, this or that, maybe I missed, and so they give up. How many deer, you know, feed the coyotes like that? I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot more than people care to admit. I was always a fan of 30-06, and if I was set up in a place where I wasn't going to be jumping deer, I carried a Savage Model 110 30-06 for years and years and years. I got that for my, I think it was for my 14th birthday maybe. But great rifle, killed dozens and dozens of deer with it. And I noticed that, you know, when you hit them with 30-06, they tend to go right down. Sometimes they drop right there. Sometimes they run 20, 30 yards. But they usually drop within sight of where you shot them, if it was any kind of decent hit at all. And yes, there was some meat damage involved. But that isn't the fault of the 30-06. Or in this regard, you know, a Magnum 300 Win Mag or whatever. It comes down much more to bullet selection and shot placement. If you go out there with a cheap, you know, over-the-counter ammo, Remington Core-Lock, Winchester Super X, and don't get me wrong, they're very effective. They're cost-effective, and they put a lot of meat in the freezer. But those cup and core bullets, you know, if you push them up over about 2,800 feet per second, they expand pretty violently, and a lot of times they'll shed their jacket, do a bunch of damage, and you know, if you have to take a quartering shot at game, it's going to do a lot of damage. And I've seen that. I mean, I've lost some front quarters of deer by using ammo like that. When I started, you know, getting older and having, you know, jobs and making my own money and everything, and buying my own ammo and testing it, I started going to a higher quality bullet, a bonded bullet, like Nosler Accubon, and shot some Barnes too, monolithic bullets. And I discovered that they drop deer just as fast as those violently expanding cup and core bullets, but they do a lot less meat damage, and almost always complete penetration. So, you know, people go back and forth with this. Some people say, I want that bullet to explode inside the deer, transfer all the energy. And other people don't want that. They want to see a complete pass-through, nice exit wound, not too big, and animal bleeding out on both sides. That's where I stand with it. If I have to take a quartering shot, I want to do it with a bonded bullet, or like a Barnes or a Hornady GMX. So back to Gun Blue 490. That nobody really needs a 300 Win Mag or even a 30-06 unless you're hunting out west, you know, really big game, or you're shooting at very long distances. You know, even if you live on the East Coast, or let's say, you know, New England, wherever, and most of your hunting is done inside 100 yards in the woods, you know, a 30-30 will get it done, don't get me wrong. But almost everyone plans to hunt other game at some point. And it's nice to have the ability to do that. You know, the old saying comes up all the time. I've asked other people this. If you could only have one rifle, what would it be? I'm sure glad we don't live in a place where you could only have one rifle and have to make that terrible decision, because I like rifles. I like lots of different rifles. But if I could only have one and I lived in the lower 48, I would pick 300 Winchester mag. It is a truly versatile cartridge. In full power loadings, it's perfect for any big game in North America, with the exception of brown bear. So for elk, moose, you name it, it's perfect. It's enough gun for the biggest moose, and people say, well, it's too much gun for everything else. I beg to differ. With a bonded bullet, like I mentioned, and good shot placement, you're not going to do any more meat damage than you would with a 30-30 or a 308. It's about shot placement, picking your shot, and using a good tough bullet that's up to the task, one that isn't going to fragment on you. But the other reason a lot of people shy away from the Magnums is the recoil aspect. And it's a real deal. I mean, if for a young person, or maybe a lady, or maybe you had shoulder surgery, maybe you just can't take the recoil. The big Magnum in the full power loads, it's real recoil. I mean, I'm used to it. I shoot it a lot. It doesn't bother me. I can shoot, as much as I want to without an issue. But I can remember being younger, when I was a kid and shooting a bigger rifle, and man, that kick was smart. And you don't want a young person or a lady to develop a flinch. If you're nursing a torn rotator cuff or something, you don't want to damage that. You don't want to be kicking that around. So you can have multiple rifles, like I do, or you could really buy one really nice rifle in a 300 Win Mag or something like that, and hand load for it. And then, I mean, the sky's the limit. You can make very low velocity, almost zero recoil plinker loads, all the way up to full power loads with heavy bullets that starts approaching 338 Win Mag energy levels. So that's what I set out to do in this video. Test rifle for this project is my son's Ruger M77 Hawkeye, stainless and synthetic, in 300 Win Mag. It's topped off with a Nikon Pro Staff 3-9x40. Very good, common, typical hunting setup for Alaska or really anywhere else in America. But I wanted to explore those low velocity 30 caliber rounds in a rifle like this. Of course, you can buy reduced recoil rounds for lots of different cartridges, including the 300 Win Mag. Remington Managed Recoil is one. It shoots a 150 grain core lock bullet at 2,650 feet per second. That's like a mild 308 Winchester or a 300 Savage type velocity. Hornady Custom Light is another. Uses a 150 grain SST bullet at a muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second. That would be outstanding. I would hunt practically anything with that. SSTs, they get a bad rap because if you try and shoot it out of at 3,100, 3,200 feet per second, they tend to come apart and do a lot of damage. But at moderate velocities, like 308 Winchester, even 30-06 velocities, they hold together pretty well. It's a fairly tough bullet. People confuse them and think they're like Hornady's answer to the Nosler ballistic tip. They're really not. They're quite a bit tougher than that, while still offering really good expansion. So at low velocities, that's a deer killing machine, or bear, or whatever. And then HSM offers reduced recoil ammo, 150 grain Sierra Game King bullets in theirs, and they load them at a very low velocity, 2398. So you can get, if you don't hand load, you could still have a lot of versatility with the 300 Win Mag with the different over-the-counter offerings. One of the problems is cost, though, which is one of the reasons I got into hand loading. It was the Magnum cartridges and the cost associated with being able to shoot them enough to get proficient with your rifle. And you know, at $2, $3, $4 a round, holy cow, man, it'd go broke trying to shoot like that. The Remington Managed Recoil is the least expensive at $25.99 a box. I can hand load that box of ammo for about $9. The Hornady Custom Light with the SSTs runs $37.99. I figured about $12 to load that one. Or the HSM with 150 grain Sierra Game Kings, they want $48.99 for a box of 20, and I can load that for about $12. So you can see the cost savings there. If you're going to shoot a lot, it's worth hand loading. If you're only going to shoot a few to sight in and then go hunting, it's probably not worth it unless you just enjoy doing it. So my experiment today was, I want to see if I could duplicate the minimum power levels for deer hunting. And in my estimation, the very minimum cartridge in .30 caliber that I would recommend hunting deer with would be a 7.62 by 39 Russian, you know, an SKS rifle or an AK-47. Lots of deer get killed with them, and like I mentioned before, lots of deer get wounded and run away bleeding and then die in the woods with them too. But if you have, you know, a 10-year-old kid going to shoot his first deer off a food plot at 30, 40, 50 yards, a little kid can't take recoil, this is a good option. It's a good option. You know, my son shot his first buck with an SKS rifle because he was a little kid and it didn't kick much and he could shoot it. You know, the length of pole was right for him. So it definitely does the job. Like I said, I killed a bunch of deer with it. It's just, it's underpowered. I attempted to duplicate 7.62 by 39, and I used 125 grain Spear TNT bullet. A lot of your 7.62 by 39 bullets are 310 diameter and they weigh 123 grains or 124 grains. So the 125 grain Spear TNT is a good bullet for testing this. First up, I used Trail Boss. I figured this would get into the minimum amount of velocity necessary with a 125 grain bullet to take a deer at very short range. At 26.5 grains of Trail Boss, we got 2,174 feet per second, and it shot a 2.1 inch group. That's about AK-47 accuracy. I mean, from my experience, SKS AK-47 with a little scope on it, you can shoot about 2-3 inch groups. So that perfectly duplicated, you know, velocity-wise and everything, kind of a mild 7.62 by 39 round. And you know, on the Trail Boss, it doesn't like compression. So my starting charge, 26.5, was a pretty full case. And I actually lost velocity as I increased powder charge with the Trail Boss. So it dropped down, you know, 100 feet per second, my next charge, and another 100 feet per second, 50, and then kind of bounced around at the end. But, you know, I've seen it before and I've heard it. Trail Boss powder doesn't like compression. It doesn't do you any good. It's not going to get you any more velocity once that case is already full. So we've absolutely duplicated 7.62 by 39 here. And with 155 grain ELDM, I really wanted to try and approach that minimum threshold of like a 30-30 Winchester, get around those velocities, or like a 7.62 by 39 with the 145 grain or 154 grain soft point, which you do see. It's out there in factory loaded ammo. Tends to be pretty low velocity, but in the testing I've done in years past, usually got about 2,200 feet per second out of the SKS and about 2,000 feet per second out of the AK-47. So, and down here I switched from Trail Boss to H4895. I'm just using powders I have that I can find data for reduced loads with. H4895 is a great reduced load powder. Works in a lot of different cartridges, and you can reduce the volume a lot safely. Most powders you cannot do that. And it shot pretty darn good, you know, with a 155 grain bullet. That's, you know, I figured 150 grain 30-30 Winchester, or the heavies in 7.62 by 39. So at 38 grains, we got 2022 feet per second. And we're shooting about an inch right across, with the exception of 41 grains that upped it to 2 inches, but about an inch, inch and a half. So very good accuracy. I mean, a lot of rifles, even, you know, big bolt action rifles, inch and a half is what they'll do for most people. So we achieved that pretty easily. And very, very mild recoil. Very low recoil. Now with the Trail Boss, with those loads, it's like shooting a 22. There's practically no recoil at all. A little kid could shoot that and have no trouble at all, or a little lady. And even the with the H4895 and the 155 grainers, it's super mild recoil, like shooting a full-size rifle in 243 or something like that. Now I had cameras all set up when I was shooting this at the range. And I'm toying with some new cameras right now, and it turns out I'm not very smart when it comes to cameras. So I had the settings all jacked up, and you know, my bench camera footage, it looked like it was a snowstorm, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. I think that was an exposure problem. I don't know. And there was problems with the target camera too, fading in and out, and then it shut itself off. So it's a learning curve with the new cameras. I'm not going to make you guys watch that footage. My next plan was to load this to, you know, a higher velocity round, but still very mild. I wanted to come up with something that was in the 308 Winchester to 30-06 velocity range. So for this phase of it, I used a bullet that I had a box of just to use them up. I used 168 grain ELD M. Not a hunting bullet, but I figured the weight's right. You know, for a 165 grain class bullet, it'd be just fine. And I loaded those up with Hybrid 100V, Hodgdon's Hybrid 100V powder, and also with H4895 again. And this time I had a little bit better luck with the cameras, so let's take a look, see how they did. Alright, so we're still having a few camera issues out there, but like I said, it's a learning curve and I'm not a camera guy, so I'll get it. It's an improvement over the stuff I was working with. It was 10 years old and pretty much completely broken down. So we had decent accuracy and easily hit those thresholds, you know, with 168 grain bullet, with the Hybrid 100V, shooting 2600 to 2700 feet per second. Perfect. And that's right in there at 308 Winchester velocities. Decent little groups, nothing spectacular. They're all 1.25 inches up to the biggest one was just under 2 inches. But pretty good. Definitely accurate enough to hunt deer with or whatever. With the H4895, groups tightened up quite a bit. At 51 grains, right at 2600 feet per second. Nice little group. One little flyer off here almost was a really good group. Extreme spreads are kind of gross, and you do see that with low case fill. You know, when you have a case half full of powder, there's a lot of room for play in there, and that seems to affect the numbers. So if you're working up a long range target load, you'd really have to do some workups and find a charge that was giving you good numbers, and those numbers might fluctuate with temperature and air pressure and everything because there's so much air still in the case. There's some people who use case fillers, you know, cotton batting, or to kind of hold the powder in place. I don't really want to get into any of that. That seems a little bit too wacky for me. I don't want to do it. But as we approached our higher charges, the numbers got quite a bit better. At 52.5 grains, we were at 2,675 feet per second. Extreme spread of only 20, but the group was 1.6, so perfectly fine for hunting. But you know, I'm used to shooting little bitty groups, so it's pretty ugly looking to me. At 53 grains, so we were up to 2,723 feet per second. Extreme spread of only 18, so getting much better, and the group size dropped down to 0.88, so that's very good. I mean, for a Ruger M77 that isn't bedded, nothing done to it, that's about as good as they shoot. In my experience, it's tough to get them to shoot any better than that, especially with a 3-9 scope. You know, I'm shooting 1-inch dots. My eyes aren't as young as they used to be. I really like about a 12-power scope for shooting groups at 100 yards, but it's a hunting scope, so we left that on there. And it's kind of double grouping. A lot of times when you see this, you're right on the edge of a node, either a good node or a bad, but it's about to have a point of impact shift. It's right in the middle of it. A lot of times if you work up a couple more charges in like 0.2 of a grain increments, you'll find a spot where these two kind of separate groups kind of combine and come together. And so I might go up a little bit here in just a couple more charge weights, real fine charge weights, or maybe play with bullet seating, see if I can tighten that up. But like I said, that's probably as good as I can shoot with this rifle, with that scope. And we're at, you know, like a mild 30-06 or a full power 308 Winchester, and shooting that kind of charge out of this rifle, it was very mild recoil. You know, even I think a pretty young teenager or a young lady or somebody with a, you know, a shoulder problem could still shoot that and be comfortable, take a few shots. It's not going to hurt them. So I hope you guys found this all interesting. I sure did. I've been wanting to try this for a long time, and just kind of show people that, you know, you could buy one really good rifle and hunt practically anything in North America with it if you hand load. You can tune that rifle down for, you know, plinkers all the way up to big bull moose, and it's just incredible versatility from one rifle. Now, being in Alaska, if I could only have one rifle, I would probably bump it up to 338 Win Mag, just so that you're a little more prepared for the big brown bears. Not that 338 Win Mag would be my first choice for brown bear. I want something bigger than that, and I carry stuff bigger than that for the big bears. But it gets the job done, and that's seen as kind of the minimum for brown bears. Anywhere else in North America, 300 Win Mag is, in my opinion, the most versatile rifle you can have. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.